All right, we should be good with recording now, I believe.
Awesome. So yeah, today I'm excited to get the opportunity to talk to you all about Office add-in development. It's something that I am particularly passionate about. It's an area that I work in commercially, being the Chief Technology Officer at One Place Solutions. We've been building commercial add-ins now for well over a decade, maybe 15 years. So the technology's changed enormously over that time, but really the business problems that we solve haven't changed that greatly. It's all about bringing end user capabilities and putting it in the hands inside the applications they work in, day out. So let's crack into it. This is top level what we'll be going through in this session. I'm going to talk about what add-ins are. I really start at the basics, assuming basically zero knowledge. I'm going to talk about what they are, why I'm so passionate about building them, and we're just going to go through some of the basic building blocks and what you can do with add-ins, the business scenarios that they can unlock, and then we're actually going to dive in and we're going to create an add-in from scratch. I'm going to show you sort of the tooling involved in that and how we go about it. So first up, what is an add-in? It is really a way to extend the out-of-the-box experience inside of the core Office applications. So for the scope of what I'm talking about today, I'm going to be talking about Outlook, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Teams is similar, but it's talking through the development story in that, and the options available in that is a talk in its own right. So I'm just going to stick to the core traditional Microsoft Office applications. But this is the ability to bring your own custom functionality into those core applications. So the opportunity of Office add-ins, why would you look to bring your own custom functionality inside of these Office products? First and foremost, it's to minimize context switching on the users. I've got a slide dedicated to this coming up next, but this is what I see as one of the biggest issues that our information workers have today. It's the amount of windows that we have open, the amount of juggling that we've got that goes on for someone to carry out the tasks that are expected of them day in, day out. We've got all these tools at our disposal, all these applications, and they all serve a need in their own right, but it's up to the end user to know what all the tools are used for, bring them all together and use them in the right way. Where add-ins fit in is it gives us, well, I believe it gives us this ability to give people the tools they need, the data they need inside of the application that they're actually working inside of, and really minimize that context switching and cognitive load that we put on our users. The other opportunity is inside of these Office applications, these repetitive tasks that people tend to do. It might be creating an Excel spreadsheet or a report that they do on a monthly basis, a weekly basis. It could be on a daily basis that someone's doing these repetitive tasks inside of Word and Excel. Being able to automate those repetitive tasks frees the user up to do more high value work. But what you also tend to find is that if you can automate something, it's done more reliably and more accurately. Humans make mistakes, and the more time that they spend doing a mind-numbing task, the more likely they are to actually make mistakes. From a developer's point of view, you can also look at the core Office applications as building blocks for building a system of your own. I've seen this with the PayPal invoicing add-in actually did this. So PayPal, they've got a user base, they've got the payment sort of side of things, but what they did, rather than inventing their own invoicing system and giving people a way of laying out invoices and performing calculations, instead they used Excel and brought the PayPal functionality into Excel. So they used an add-in where you could bring in all the invoicing details, all the line items, if you like, for the invoicing, but then that leaves the user inside of the familiar Excel environment where they can further manipulate the invoice if they want to, and they've got all the power of Excel. They've got a product with 20 years worth of experience behind it. So as a developer, you can see the Office applications as building blocks. So rather than having to create your own application to get that sort of, in the case of Excel, computational functionality, in the case of Word, an entire word processor, instead of having to build your own one of those, if that's a core piece of an application you're trying to build, you could build an add-in and leverage the application that's already there for you and users are used to and trained in. And lastly, if you're looking at developing an add-in more from a commercial perspective and selling it, there is the huge opportunity that you're extending applications that already have over 250 million monthly active users. So rather than encouraging those users to install a brand new application on the desktop and train them up in how to use it, it's a much easier sell to extend an application they're already using day in, day out. All right, this is my slide on context switching. Hopefully it resonates with you, but I just want to walk through a very common scenario, which if you don't experience yourself, I'm sure you can relate to, just an example of how bad context switching is. So let's take the example of a user that is creating a quotation to send out, and they're going to do that through Microsoft Word. So we open up Word and we're staring at a blank Word document. Now, typically, someone's going to try and take a shortcut here. You're not going to start with a blank Word document every time. You're probably just going to open up a few quotes that you've recently sent out, choose the one that most closely matches what you're trying to achieve this time, and copy and paste it. So if we are a good user, we'd probably store our quotes in somewhere central like SharePoint Online. So we'd open up a browser, we'd open up a few of the old quotes, do a copy and paste job into our new blank Word document. Great. We've got the format of it. We're just going to clear out some of those line items and who it's addressed to, things like that. Then we're going to have to find the line items to go on here for our quote. And to do that, you're probably looking up some sort of product spreadsheet or product index to get the actual line items, the product names, and how much each of these products is currently worth to put on the quote. So we do a copy paste job. We open up that price list. We open up the price list. It's going to be in Excel. We start copying and pasting those product names across in the unit prices. So we've got that information into our Word quote now. But Word is really bad at doing calculations. So at this point, you're going to have to add up what all those line items are worth. You could have multiple units at each line item. So you're going to have to do a few calculations across there. You're going to end up with a total. Now, whether you crack out your old desktop calculator or if you open the calculator application, it's still another thing that the user has to bring in to this creating a quotation process. Okay, by this stage, it's looking good. We've got our quote, we've got our line items, we've got our totals. But who's it going to get sent to? We need to put some addressing information on the top of this. So that probably involves going out to a CRM system. And every CRM system I've ever dealt with, you have a company records and you have contact records. So we're at least going to have to open up the company record and start copying and pasting some information across about what company we're sending this to. Then we're going to have to open up a contact record. And I've never seen one that just allows me to cut a whole block out that's got all the contacts information on it. You have to copy the first name, Alt Tab over to Word, paste the first name, cut the last name, paste, address line 1, address line 2, and we continue playing this game of Alt Tab and Control C, Control V. And we finally get to the point where we've got all of our information on our quote ready to go. A quick tally here tells me I've got 4 windows open to Word documents. We've got the Word doc, the quote that we're working on, the 3 old quotes that we looked at to copy from. We have to open up SharePoint in a browser. Then we have to open up probably a different document library, which is probably another tab in a SharePoint window to find this price list. We opened it in Excel. We opened a calculator application. Then we opened at least 2 windows to our CRM application to get the information. By my count, that's at least 10 new windows that we just opened on this poor user's desktop. And I would say that most users would already have Outlook running, probably Teams these days, and can almost guarantee that they would have had Windows open in that browser before we even started getting to SharePoint Online. So you can already see that this is stacking up, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this. And this is a big cognitive load. As you're going through this process, you're holding this context in your mind as to why you have these windows open and where you're up to in the process. But as soon as you get a phone call, a coworker comes over to your desktop, the front door rings now that we're working from home and you've got to go pick up that parcel. You come back to your desk and you think, why did I have all these windows open? Where am I up to? And if you're anything like me, I just start shutting these windows down until I get back to a comfortable space where I know what I'm doing. And then I start to build the context up again and go back through the process. So this is really a key scenario where add-ins could really help, because really the user, the central application here is creating the quote in Word. If we could bring this information to the user when and where they needed it, we could actually prevent all of these extra windows from being opened and really streamline that business process. So just a quick example of how bad this context switching is. And what you find during the day is that users won't just be doing one of these business processes. Obviously, a lot of the time, they'll actually be doing a lot of these in parallel. They'll be creating a quote while they're doing something else, And this problem just gets worse and worse. So add-ins to the rescue. what makes up an add-in? What is an add-in? What's an Office add-in technically? It's really two critical pieces to an Office add-in. The first is what we call the manifest file. It's an XML file. It contains no code. It defines what your add-in is, such as what host application is this going to show up in? Is this a Word add-in? Is it an Excel add-in? Is it an Outlook add-in? So it gives that information as to which host application inside the Office suite it should show up in. It also gives some identity information, like what's my add-in called. But critically, what it does is it tells the host application how your add-in is going to surface itself. Is it going to show itself as some buttons in the ribbon? Is it going to show itself as a task pane? Things like that. So it's just telling the host application, this is a bit of high-level information about myself, but it's none of the code. And then the second piece to the add-in is it's basically a web application. We're building web applications when we build an add-in. And fundamentally, if you boil that down to its simplest terms, you can just think of that as a HTML page. And that's what we've got on this slide here. So really, you've got a manifest file, which defines your add-in, and you've got a HTML page or a whole web application. Now, the HTML page and your whole web application that is your add-in, that is hosted as a developer. You're hosting that on a web server somewhere. It runs on a web server. Now it's not running on the client's machine. If you're developing this as sort of like a product vendor, this wouldn't be running even on a client site. If you're in an enterprise scenario, this might be running on a web server inside of your enterprise. But where you host it is really irrelevant. It's just up to you as the developer that you need to host this. The Microsoft framework infrastructure isn't going to host that for you. Obviously, you can use Azure and host it up there inside of your own Azure tenant, but you're responsible for that as a developer. And then the linkage between them is really the manifest file. Somewhere in that, it will be pointing across to where your web application lives. So if this was a task pane application, which is what you would see here. So this is how your add-in actually shows up. This is like a task pane add-in inside of Word. It shows up side by side with the file that you're working on. What Word is really doing is it's just showing almost like an embedded web browser window to your web application. And it sits side by side with the document that you're working on. Now that manifest file will at some stage say that, okay, this add-in is going to represent itself as a task pane add-in. And when the user wants to use this add-in, here's the URL, and it will point across to the HTML page that you're hosting somewhere, and that provides the functionality of the add-in. There are two critical pieces, and everything else that's built on top of that is just making the add-in fancier, adding more functionality. Okay, so I've already alluded to the fact that when we build modern add-ins inside of Office, we're building them on web technology. So everything boils down to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And the reason for that is that Office is these days is an run on any device type product. You can get Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook that'll run on Windows, Mac, web browser, and on phones and devices, Android, iPhone. All the Office products will run on all of those. So our extensibility story needs to be done in a technology that also runs across all of those platforms. So I guess what I'm also saying there is if you develop a Office add-in, then it will run on all devices. So it will work for Office on the web. It will also work for Office on a Windows desktop, Office on a Mac desktop. And what comes along with the fact that we're now doing web development for Office add-ins is that you have a more modern distribution model. Prior to this web-based model, what we had was you had to physically install products that are going to add remove programs in Windows. So you had to be an administrator of the machine, you're physically installing software. What that's turned into is it's more actually acquiring an add-in or a user associating an add-in to a user it is exactly that. It's more of an association. It's really what it's doing is it's taking this manifest and it's associating it with a user's Office 365 identity. And then no matter what device a user uses, if they log into Office with that Office 365 identity, this manifest follows them around everywhere. And because it's web-based, you're not physically installing anything on a machine and it's just rendering the add-ins inside of little mini web browser windows, is that nothing needs to be installed on these machines. So you could use an add-in, you could add it for the very first time on your work desktop machine and start using, say, a Word add-in. And then you could potentially go to a kiosk at an airport, go to a web browser, log into your Office account, and the add-in will just be running in that kiosk in an airport. if your organisation allowed you to use kiosks at airports and didn't block that. But the point I'm trying to make is we don't need to install anything on machines anymore, and an add-in roams with your user profile. Okay, so the really common building blocks for Office add-ins that go across all the different core applications, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, are these. The first one is what we call an add-in command. Now, this loosely translates to buttons on ribbons. So creating a tab on the Office ribbon, creating a button on the Office ribbon. We call them add-in commands because in some of the hosts, on some of the devices, you don't actually get a ribbon. So let's say if we took Outlook on your phone, which a lot of you are familiar with using, I imagine, you don't have the concept of a ribbon there. But add-ins still work, and that's why we call them add-in commands, because they just surface themselves in a slightly different way. The second, and probably the most common, is the task pane. Now, this is where it slides out from the right-hand side, and you've got your add-in running side by side with the file that you're working on. And it can help you in compose scenarios, in sort of trying to, well, I guess it has read-write access, can have read-write access to help you compose whatever it is that you're trying to write, or it can help you understand what's written there in front of you as well. So that's a task pane application. That's one of the most common. Often these two work in combination as well. Often what you'll find is you'll have an add-in command that opens the task pane. An add-in command can also do something without any UI involved at all. It could just perform some action on the file. Another common one is a content add-in. This one is one of the easiest ways to explain this. One of the best examples for this is if you think in Excel, you have a chart, like a bar chart, a pie chart, where this add-in physically forms part of the content of the file. So the task pane sort of lives side by side. It's not part of the file itself, but a content add-in is. And you can have multiple of these, just like you can have multiple charts in Excel, you can have multiple content add-ins. And the last of the common blocks is the dialog. This just allows you to pop open a larger bit of real estate on the screen where you have full control over the user interface of that. And any of these other points can bring one of those up. So an add-in command, a ribbon button up here, could just launch a dialog, prompt you for a whole load of information, and then go and do something with it. Might manipulate something that's going on with this file. Likewise, a task pane can pop open a dialog, a content add-in can pop open a dialog. But these are just the common building blocks that all the Office applications have. If we get time later on, we'll see how we're going for time. I've got a few slides in there that go through specific extensions that are different. So I've got some Excel ones, and Outlook's got quite a few of its own unique building blocks as well. But these ones are common to all the Office applications. Okay, so we've got a host application, especially if we look at something like Office on a desktop machine. And let's say we've got a task pane there. You've got a web page, a HTML page showing in an embedded web browser. Now it's sitting side by side with our Word document. But anyone that's done any sort of basic HTML web programming will know that, well, if this thing's running in a web browser, I can't possibly reach out onto my machine and start manipulating what I'm doing inside of my Word file. So what is it that allows this standalone HTML page to just be shown magically inside of this little web browser embedded inside of Word, and it can manipulate what's going on? And it has context of what's going on inside of Word. And the magic that makes this happen is there is a JavaScript library that you can use on your HTML page, and that is the modern API for Office add-ins. And what that does is that does give you context. It's the conduit between the host application and your HTML page that's running it as an add-in. So it will give you information as to what the user is currently doing, and you can, via that API, you can tell it to update things. So insert sentences inside of Word, change cell values inside of Excel. And it's just as simple as loading in this one JavaScript file. That loads in this Office.js JavaScript file, and then we've got a full API available to us. To give an example of what that looks like, this is just a bit of plain JavaScript code. I can tell by the first line here we're talking about Outlook, because this Office refers to this Office.js library that we've just loaded in. Context gives us context of what the host application is doing. And inside of here, we're looking at the mailbox. So I can tell we're inside of an Office add-in. So what this is doing is it's giving us a handle on the item that the user is currently looking at inside of Outlook. On a mail item, we have attachments, and here it's just checking to see if there is any attachments. The length would be greater than 0 if there was any attachments. Then we're going through a for loop here, and for each of the attachments, I can see it's just having a look at the name. It's just building up a string. So it's looking at the name of the attachment, the ID of the attachment, content type, size, whether it's an inline attachment or not. So that's just a simple example of how JavaScript running on this HTML page can interact and have context as to what's going on inside that host application. All right, let's go to our first demo. For this one, I'm going to jump across to the web and I'm going to open Excel on the web. I'm going to open up a new Excel document. I'm actually going to show you an add-in here. This add-in is called Script Lab, and you can download it yourself from the store. If you want to get add-ins, it's a simple matter of going to Insert menu inside of Excel, and there's add-ins here. And you can browse the entire store. You can just search for Script Lab inside of here, and you'll be able to add it. I've already added it here. It shows as a tab. So this would be the manifest XML file that is telling it that once I want to use this add-in, that manifest would define, okay, Script Lab creates a tab. It's got this many add-in commands, and this is what the names of them all need to be. So at this stage, we haven't loaded any JavaScript in. We haven't hit their development server. This is just information that's stored inside of that manifest XML file. As soon as we start pressing the buttons, however, that's when we'll be following links that are inside that manifest, and we'll be starting to execute code. So if I press the code button here, and here we see a task pane has flown out, and this is where we're actually hitting a web server off somewhere else. Let's see what I can do here. If I go and view the frame source here, you'll see that it's opened up. This is where that is being hosted, scriptlab.azureedge.net. So it's not part of the Office team, it's Scriptlab's hosting this. Okay, so what this add-in allows us to do is, let me take a step back. If we wanted to play around, this allows us to play around basically with the Office.js, this JavaScript library. So it's a great one to do as a demo because I can show you quickly and easily what we can do here. But normally, if we didn't have this add-in and you wanted to even just write a Hello World application, first of all, you need to craft your own manifest XML. Second of all, you need to have that HTML page and you need to host it on a development server. You need to get it inside of the Office application. What the Script Lab add-in allows us to do is it actually gives you snippets of code that give you examples of what you can do with the JavaScript API. But even better than that is it actually allows you to then take those snippets and modify them and run the modified code, all without you having to stand up anything as a developer. So I've done nothing magical here. I've just opened Excel in a browser, added the Script Lab add-in, and now I can just do this. And you can do this yourself. So if I come into the samples area here, I'm going to pick this first one, a basic API call. Okay, so we can see it's written some JavaScript code here. So this is code that's going to execute. There's a few tabs across the top here. I'm just going to point to the first two. So one is a HTML page. So when I tell this to run, it's going to take this code away, and it's actually going to host instead this HTML and this JavaScript. It's going to host in this task pane. It's actually going to run it in another task pane. So let's have a quick look at what it's doing. It's just got some text here. This sample demonstrates basic Excel API calls. It's going to let us select some cells in a worksheet, then press a button, and we've got a button here, highlight selected range. If I looked at the script, behind it is that they're just adding an on-click event to the one button that's going to be in that HTML. And when they click on that button, this is what they're doing. In Excel, what we do is we pass in a context. So that gives us this information at that point in time when the button's clicked. It tells us this context, gives us the ability it's an object which we can walk through to see what the state of Excel currently is at the time that button's clicked. So what it's going to do is it's going to look inside of the context. It's going to look at the current workbook and it's going to get whatever is currently selected. It's going to put that into this range, and then a range object, we can perform operations against it. So here it's taking the range and it's filling it with the color yellow. And then at the end, once you've done whatever you want to do, it doesn't get executed line by line. It waits till you call this context.sync. Once we call that, whatever operations we've performed all get executed when we call this context.sync. All right, so let's run this. And so now it takes that HTML, and here it is. We're actually seeing the HTML being rendered with this button. And so it says highlight selected range. So let's select a few cells. I click highlight selected range, and there it goes. It's changed them to yellow. Now, if we went back into that code, we can start poking around and see what's possible with this API. So let's not change it to yellow. Let's change it to blue instead. We'll go back and run it again. Let's change these cells to blue. Okay, so we can start poking around and see what's possible. Even better with these, with the Scriptlab add-in, we actually get type ahead completion as well, so we can see what we can do. So if we took that range, we actually trying to assign some values to it. You can see that I'm getting type ahead as I go here. Actually, just try to put a value in there. It's going to be really hard to see if it's blue. Let's set that back to yellow. Okay, so now when I run it, it's just going to change it to yellow and insert the value of 10. So we've got this massive API available to us in Excel where we can start doing content creation on behalf of the user. We can automate things, but this Scriptlab add-in is really powerful in learning what you can do, poking around the API to see what's possible before you even have to even think about setting up your own development environment. If we go back and have a look at some of the other samples that are out here, you can see the scroll bar is massive and it shows us how to do a lot of things inside of Excel. One of the ones I wanted to show you, which goes through a more complete one, what was it called? I think scenarios. Yeah, here's one called report generation. This one does a lot. I'm not going to walk you through the code. I'm going to just use it instead because there's heaps of these that you can go through to see how they all work. So here we go, create report. This one, here we go. It's created a table, formatted it, populated it with data, created a chart based off that data, and this is all dynamic. If we start changing values, it's going to change the charts according to it. So those scenarios where someone's going through and creating those quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily reports and doing them all by hand, all of that information can be automated. And you could imagine that this add-in that we're making, it can integrate with our line of business systems, and it can be pulling data from our own systems and driving our reports. So Scriptlab is really powerful to be able to go in and see what's possible with that JavaScript API. Okay, so going beyond using that Scriptlab add-in, let's say you've gone in there, you've seen what it's capable of, and you think, okay, I want to actually build an add-in from this. I can see it's got enough functionality that I can integrate with one of my line of business systems. I can automate something that's a real pain for my users. So where do you start when you want to actually create a Office add-in of your own? And now you could craft it yourself with Notepad if you liked, but you're in for a hell of a time. The easiest way to get started is using something called the Yeoman generator for Office. The Yeoman generator for Office, let's go back first. Yeoman itself is a generic scaffolding system. It's got nothing to do with Microsoft. It's got nothing to do with Office. It is almost the equivalent for those that have ever used Visual Studio. Yeoman is almost like your new project menu. You open up Visual Studio, you've got nothing to start with, and you say, I want to create a new project, and then you get this selection of all these different project types you can create. When you create one of those, normally some provisioning process goes off and it creates a whole heap of files, and then you're left with a new one of these type of projects. Well, in the web development world, Yeoman scaffolds up new projects like that. So Yeoman is the generic scaffolding tool, and then you have Yeoman generators for the different project types. So there is a Yeoman generator for Office, and that's what we use. So in order to do that, we get Yeoman, which is you just download, install that. It's a tool, and then we get the generator for Office, which sort of goes in on top of Yeoman, and that's going to rapidly allow us to set up a new Office add-in, get all those files. It's a Hello World application ready to run, and then you can just start adding your functionality into it. And it's more than just, I guess it is more than just the bare files that allow you to just start debugging and do a Hello World. It's actually a whole tool chain, this generator for Office. So not only does it have the bare files, but it's also got a lot of tooling around it to do local debugging, to package the files up, all the assets up, to minify them, and to get a code that's ready to ship off to a production server when you get to that point. And One of the things I noticed when I first transitioned across from doing Microsoft development, traditional Microsoft development in Visual Studio, to doing web development was that there's an enormous amount of choice that you have in all of this tooling. What you use for doing your styling, what you use for bundling this thing up, what you use for hosting it. But what the generator for Office does is that it makes a choice in all of these, and it uses sort of best practices and tooling that over the years we've learned works well together and that other developers are using. So that can often help you get started, and you can use that default tooling until you get to such a point that for some specific reason you think, well, there is better tooling for this particular piece that's more suited to my scenario. That's just a link off to the information about the generator for Office. And that is called Yo Office, which you'll find when I get into a demo here in a minute. Yo Office is actually the command we run when we want to generate a new project using the Yeoman generator. I think with that, yep, we're going to jump off and we're going to do a demo of this. So I have just an empty folder here. I am going to run this. Going to just bring up command window at this folder location. Now, as I said, what I've done to get to this point is I have just downloaded the Yeoman Office. I've downloaded Yeoman and I've downloaded the Office generator for Yeoman. If you follow the link that was on that slide, which I'll be providing the slide deck for you, gives you simple instructions to download those two tools. Once you've downloaded that, you call Yeoman just by typing Yo, and then it's the generator that you want to use. So the Office generator is called Office. So we just call Yo Office, and this will bring up an interactive experience where it will ask us some questions to help us create this Office add-in. And here we go with some questions. So what type of Office add-in do we want to create? We've got a task pane project. We've got a task pane project using a whole Angular framework, which is a web development framework, which brings a lot of functionality to it. We've got a React framework, and we've got a few other types in here as well. For us to keep things simple, I'm just going to create an Office add-in task pane project. It's just going to be vanilla, or it's going to be either TypeScript or JavaScript. I'm going to use TypeScript because this gives us type ahead completion and it stops us from making silly mistakes. What do you want to name your add-in? We are going to call this a product catalog. I might even give that a capital. Okay, that looks good to me. And which of the Office applications would I like to support with my add-in? I am going to create an Outlook add-in. Okay, this is going to go off and it's going to scaffold up this project for me. Now, this will take a little while. I'm not going to let it continue because it'll take 5 minutes. And I would rather not bore you with that. Here is one that I did just before we started this call. Let's open this one up. Just going to open this up in Visual Studio Code. So if I had let that other one continue and do all of its downloading, this is what we would end up with. It's just a whole heap of files, really. But those questions that it asked us at the start determined what we would end up with at the end of the day here, because I told it that I wanted to use TypeScript. So when I look into some of these files here, I have these .ts files rather than .js files if I had said that I wanted to use JavaScript. And there's nothing to do with Angular or React in here, but if I'd chosen Angular or React, the output of this would have been different. So, and the other thing that it was asking us questions about was to do with what did we want to call our application. And a lot of that stuff is that manifest XML that we were talking about, that first critical part of an Office add-in that gives our add-in its identity and says what applications we want to use this add-in, or we want the host Office application to open it up in. So as we can see here, a display name, we told it that we wanted to create an add-in called product catalog, and that's what it's created. And as we look down through here, we told we wanted to create an add-in inside of Outlook, and that's why we've got mailbox specific things down inside of here as well. So it's helped to build all this. And this is why I said there's nothing stopping you from crafting this in Notepad yourself, but you're in for a hell of a time. The Yeoman generator interactively asked you questions and spat out this massive file. Now, I wish Microsoft would give us a better UI to modify this because it's quite cryptic. It's like an escape room every time I go in here, trying to add new functionality in. There's a bit of trial and error that goes on. But what you'll see in here is that this thing is determining, I'll run this in a second, but you can see that it's got URLs in here that are based on localhost. So it's actually providing the tooling inside of these files that it's created. It's actually got the tooling to actually have a whole development environment inside of here to run stuff on a local server, to host it off localhost, and to point your add-in so you can do this development experience all running on your own machine without having to involve a dedicated web server or anything. So there's a lot of tooling in there that all goes towards making this happen. Okay, so let's just see. We've made absolutely no code changes up until this point in time. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to start this thing up. And to do that, I will just view a terminal window inside of here. Whoop. Now I'm just going to tell it to start up its dev server. So what that will do is it runs over this code, it sort of compiles it up, or transpiles this TypeScript code to JavaScript, packages all this stuff up. It's actually, you can see it's got some fancy tooling inside of here as well. What it's doing is because it has to host our add-ins over HTTPS so that they're secure. It's one of the requirements of Office add-ins. It's actually, if I didn't have certificates installed for HTTPS, it's doing all this locally generating development certificates, installing them in my machine, making sure they're trusted. It's got all this tooling built into it. And that all comes with this Yeoman generator. It does all of this for you. Okay, so at this point in time, it's got this code ready. It's actually hosting this locally. And if I have a look up here, it tells me that this project is running at HTTPS localhost 3000. And that's where this manifest is actually pointing to. So the next thing to do, and we can actually do this out of the box, there's some commands here that we could have run that would just let me start this up inside of the desktop, and it would have fired up Outlook on the desktop, or I can tell it to start up and it would fire up Outlook in a web browser as well. But I told it, I actually didn't get it to do that much automation because I wanted to show you what happens with the manifest. So at this stage, I'm hosting the web component of it, that HTML page. I'm hosting that off a local server. But now I want to show you what happens with the manifest. So for that, we are going to jump across to a web browser. We don't need Excel anymore. We're done with that. Let's open up Outlook. All right, and if we come in here, what we need to do is it's called side loading the add-in. If this was a commercial add-in, we'd just get it from the store. If it was an enterprise one that we already had developed, we could roll it out through central administration. We could just upload the manifest and roll it out. But as a developer, we don't want to affect anyone else. We just want to install it for ourselves. So you go into the same area you would as if you were getting something from the store. You can go to My Add-ins, and right down the bottom, you've got this custom add-ins, and you can install an add-in from a file. And what we need to do is just point it at that manifest file. Is that the one? Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so I say I want to install that. Excellent. Now I think I needed to refresh the browser if I remember rightly to make it show up. Okay, and now we've got this product catalog. Here's our add-in. When I select that, it's actually got two options when I select one. I can show a task pane or I can perform an action. I'm going to click show a task pane. And here it is. This is our HTML page that was scaffolded up by the Yeoman generator being hosted off our local machine. So that's the mechanics of side loading the manifest, which is pointing at our development server. If we flick back to our code, what it's actually showing is this task pane HTML, all of this stuff. If I let's just get rid of all of this stuff so I can show you that it's actually working. Let's just say hi there. I'm going to save that. As I save it, you'll see this flick around. It's actually picked up that change in real time, rehosted it. If we come back to our add-in, I just right click on this and say refresh the frame. Hi there. So here we are, we've got the mechanics, we've got an add-in running, and now it's just down to actually building out our logic of what we want to achieve. Okay, let's go back into here, and we're going to make a slight change at the moment. Actually, I want to show you something else. In our manifest, we'll start in here. Inside of our manifest file, if I open it up, you'll notice a couple of things. When I tried to use this add-in, I had two options. It gave me two bits of functionality when I clicked on the add-in. It said I could open a task pane or I could just perform an action, which could just run a piece of JavaScript, which could do something. I'm going to remove that JavaScript function first, so it cleans this up a bit. So we've got this extension point, and we've got it as an Office tab. We're doing something on an Office tab. We're doing something in a group here. We've got a couple of controls. We've got one here that opens up a task pane, and here's this action button one. I'm just going to get rid of that. So we clean this up a bit. Dunk, we don't need that second action. We're just going to open a task pane for our add-in. Okay. And now you can see that it's the extension point here is the message read command surface. So our add-in is available when we're reading a message. But what I actually want to do is I actually want to make it available when we compose a message, not when we read a message. So if I flick back to this browser, what you'll notice is that this add-in is available when I've got a message selected here in read mode. We've got the product catalog add-in. If I was to create a new message, our add-in isn't available in this context. So if we want to make it available in a different context, as I said, that's the point of the manifest, is that's the manifest defines how your add-in surfaces itself. So let's go back to our manifest and let's switch which context we want this thing to show up in. So I'm going to change this read command surface to a compose command surface. These are just us giving it unique IDs, but just for completeness, I'll change all of these over to be compose. Okay, we've got our task pane in here. A lot of these things, like it's a label. It doesn't look like a label. This res ID means a resource ID, and there's quite a few things here that use resource IDs, and they're listed down the bottom of the file. Probably the important one is this task pane. So what this is really going to do is we have a button here. It's got a label. It's got a tooltip. If you hover over it, it's got an icon, and based on different devices, different icons for different sizes. But then critically, we've got this action as to what happens when you actually click on this button. There's different types of button. You can run JavaScript code, but one of the reserved types you can do is you can show a task pane. So here, we're showing a task pane, and this source location, this is what loads in the URL to our local development server where we're hosting the HTML page. So this resource ID, this res ID of task pane URL, if I come down here, you'll find that down here, where is it? Task pane URL, here, task pane URL. So that's what loads in our HTML document, and that was that one I went and modified earlier. So it's pointing to this task pane file over here. All right, so we've made a change to the manifest. Now, the important thing to realize when you're doing Office development, while you can change your HTML page and your code there, and you don't really have to do anything, it just automatically reloads for you. If you make a change to the manifest, you must reload it, sideload it again. So you need to go through that process of coming out here. We need to go into get add-ins. We need to go to my add-ins. We need to remove that old manifest that we had and add it again. Here's our modified one. So what we'll notice this time is that our add-in shouldn't be available. Let's refresh the browser. Our add-in shouldn't be available in read mode anymore, but it should be available in compose mode instead. There we go. It's gone from read, but when we go to create a new message, okay, now we've got it here. So we've just changed how it surfaces itself. Right, time to add some functionality in. Now, the use case of what I'm going to do here is imagine we're a product company and we sell products. And we have this line of business system that's got all of our product catalog and everything in it. And we've got sales people and customer service people that respond to our customers and internally all the time. And the majority of the time they talk about products. But they've got to describe products and they've got to go and cut and paste information about products all the time. Wouldn't it be great if we could expose that product catalog as an add-in and just give them the ability to search for products and just drop them straight into messages as they're writing them? So that's what we're going to do here. So that's why I've moved the add-in from being read to compose. And now we're going to start adding some code in there. Before I can do that, I am going to do a few little things in here. I am going to, first of all, we're going to add the jQuery library, which jQuery just gives us the ability to, it's like a utility of JavaScript commands. It's going to give us the ability to grab some things off the page easily. And I'm also going to install the types for that, which gives us type ahead support inside of Visual Studio Code here. So off we go to get those. That job's done. Now we are going to code into our HTML page here. You notice in here that JavaScript, the Office.js library, is already being loaded in, so we'll have access to the Office.js library. So we're going to paste some code in here, which is going to give us a very simple, I'm just mimicking what an application or what an application could look like. I'm giving it's almost a list here of recents, just imagining that if I'd recently accessed some products out of a catalog. So I've just got two things here. I've got let's call it two different models of laptops. Let's say our products that we sell are laptops. Two laptops there, and we've got a search box to search our catalog. We'll add a little bit of styling in. Let's get rid of all that Microsoft default styling, put our own in. All right, let's run this again. Okay, now let's compose a new message. We haven't put our script in there yet that actually integrates in with the Office application, but I just want to show you what we've got from a UI perspective. So here, imagine this is our product catalog. We could search our entire product catalog and get some results back and insert them, and anything that we've recently used from the product catalog, we could just insert that again as well. Okay, so that's great. We've got a bit of a UI. This is what we're trying to build. We just need to add some functionality that actually integrates in with the Office document now, in with that mail message. So we'll jump back. This time we'll go to the code behind that task pane. So we've got the task pane HTML, and now we're going to actually put some code in behind it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import jQuery. And now what happens is that when the host application starts up, it will fire this Office on ready event. That tells our add-in that Office is ready, it's loaded up, Office.js is populated, you can now start executing code. So once Office is ready, this is what we're going to do. We are going to start binding events onto our HTML page. So what I'm going to do is just going to get a handle on the current mailbox item. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go and get a handle on that list of recents. So if I jump over here to the HTML, this is this list of recents. We've got two products there, our two laptops, and you can see here that they're list items, and I've given them this attribute data product ID of 1 and 2. That's just so we can identify them. So what I'm doing here then is when our Office add-in starts up, I'm going and grabbing them and I'm putting an on-click event onto those two list items. And then what I'm doing is this is where I'm using the item that we get, which is part of this Office.js library. I'm getting a handle on the item and this set selected data async. This allows us to insert text into our email message. And more than just inserting text, it allows us to insert, if it's a HTML email, we can insert HTML into the to the message at the point that the cursor is at. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm going off and I'm inserting an image in. And the image is of the product itself. As you can see here, I'm grabbing that product data ID, that number 1 and number 2 that we had on the two list items, to dynamically build up the URL where that image is. Now we need to go and grab those images because we don't have them yet, but I can copy them across from somewhere else. Copy. We go back into here and we stick them in this assets folder. Okay, they now appear here in this assets folder. Where were they? Product 1 and product 2. Okay, now at this stage, if we save this, we've saved that, we've saved that. Excellent. We jump back to the browser. We come into here. All right, if I start our adding up again, let's say we want to address this to someone. So, hi, Mike. I think you'll like the new 2022 laptop range. And now trying to explain, rather than explain to him what that laptop range is all about and going out somewhere else, we can go to a product catalog and say, well, there's the Evo 13 laptop. These are the Evo 15 laptop. So as you can see, super simple. You can imagine if it's a sales company and you're selling products, this is a much nicer way of your sales team, your customer service team to get information out in a consistent, accurate, and professional way. If this was a full application that you were building, you could quite easily see that when you get your search results back from your catalog to insert, you might have different layouts and formats. There might be a simplified one, there might be one with full details. Through the Office JS library, we can insert attachments as well. So maybe when the product catalog comes back, you could attach on a brochure for the product, or put links in dynamically insert links in that sends the users back to the website, things like that. So it really makes it efficient, professional, consistent, with just those repetitive business processes, or automating what your users are doing. And as you can see, we've built that fairly quickly, getting that all up and running. And really now all we'd have to do to turn this from a development application that's just running on my machine to something that everyone else could use would be to take these built files, which there is a folder here that gets built as part of this tooling, is take these files and host them on a development server at a different URL. So we could just go into Azure, create a static website, dump our files up there, and our URLs would change. As soon as our URLs change, all we have to do is come into the manifest here and change these files. It won't be localhost anymore. It'll just be wherever we've moved these files to on a web server. We change these URLs, and then it's simply a matter of taking the resulting XML file, and you can upload it into your admin center, Office Admin Center, and roll it out to named users, the whole company, and it will just light up and be available to them inside of Outlook. Okay, so that is the end of that demo. And I think we're probably at time. I'll just jump back and have a look in here. I could end it about there if we've got Michael Knoll back online. If not, I could keep going, Daniel, and talk through other extensibility points and some of the other applications. Have you managed to get Michael on the line?
I do have him.
Awesome.
Unfortunately, though, we might have to schedule him for next month.
Yep.
It's the whole US, Africa, AU time zone conversion thing that has kicked in. And the invite's actually gone through for tomorrow at 5 o'clock in his calendar, 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'm just trying to work out with him right now. So if you can give us, say, 5 minutes, and I'll just see what he wants to do. And we'll go from there, if that's all right.
Sure, no problem.
Cheers.
I will continue flowing through here then, and just shout out, Daniel, if you do manage to.
Yep. No.
Okay, so continuing on, I guess when you look across the Office products and you look at how mature the APIs are for them, they're all at differing levels. Now, what I've listed down here is just what version each of the APIs are up to inside of each of the Office products. Now, while that's usually not an accurate measure of how mature it is, it just means how many releases they've had, I think it does fairly accurately represent it as to how much functionality. So Excel, you've got much more capability in the JavaScript APIs for Excel than what you do for the others. Outlook is quickly catching up, and that's where a lot of the current investment is happening. Whereas Word and PowerPoint, that's still fairly basic, the functionality that's available inside of those two products. Excel, I guess where the APIs start is they give you access to read information that's on the files, and they give you the capability to modify information, and we've seen that today. But to build truly rich applications, you often want your add-in to be able to react based on events happening, based on the user doing things. And what we see in Excel is Excel has a very rich eventing model. So all of these on events, on data changed, on format change, your add-in can subscribe to these events and react to them, do something based off a user having performed an action. That's quite powerful and quite rich. Excel also has the capability of allowing you to build your own custom functions. These are still coming under the add-in banner, but just like I'm sure you're all used to typing equals in Excel and getting all your type ahead functions to do sums and averages and things like that, you can create your own custom functions, and you can actually sell them in the store. So it might be that I don't know, you allow people to type in an address, and your service might be that it gives current estimates for the sales price of an address, and it looks it up, and you've got your own line of business system, you've got your own sort of back-end service that provides that functionality, and you could actually sell it. So that's Excel custom functions. Outlook has a couple of specific add-in points other than just the task panes. one of those is a contextual add-in, and this allows you to pick up certain text inside of a message as it's come in. So one of those is an address, another thing is phone numbers, dates, and if you, in your manifest, you say, well, this is the sort of text that I'm looking for, Outlook will automatically underline that text, and if the user clicks on it, it renders your add-in contextually where they've clicked on. So here the Bing Maps one is registered for addresses. And if you click on it, it would start up their web add-in and it would pass in the context of that text that was selected. It renders it as a map. So they're contextual add-ins. Module extensions allows
Just
you.
jumping in for 2 seconds, Cameron. Sorry,
Yeah.
we're going to have to reschedule Michael for next month. Unfortunately, his demo and slides he does not have set up and ready to go. So it'd be over for you if you want to do the demo or go through a bit more slides or content.
Yeah. Look,
happy for you too.
Okay, cool, mate. I've got probably 5-10 minutes of talking,
Yep.
and that'll be it. So if
No
everyone's
problem.
happy, I'll just keep cracking on. We should
No,
have
cheers,
plenty of
thanks.
times for any questions anyone's got as well. Yeah, Outlook has the concept of module extensions as well. So in Outlook, you have sort of your mail, your calendar, your tasks. This billable hours in this example, this is someone's add-in. So again, you'd register that in a manifest. And what that gives you is almost this entire section inside of Outlook, and the ribbon above it is all just space for you to surface your own custom functionality. Actionable messages are quite an exciting one. I quite like these. It's something vastly different to what we've had in the past. An actionable message, it only belongs inside of Outlook, but what it allows you to do is, as part of the email that you send out of your application, is you can send an adaptive card. An adaptive card is something that's interactive for the user. And in this example, this is a canonical example that Microsoft always uses as well, is something like an expense application, where traditionally what you would have is you've got your expense system. It might be its own web application where people go in and they submit their expenses. Typically what happens is someone who's responsible for approving those expenses, they get sent an email message. It would typically look something like this, but without the card in it, and you would have a button to approve or reject. And normally what that would do is it would take this approver back out to that web-based system. Now that person would have to log into that web-based system and then click the approve action and then come back to their email. What actionable messages allows you to do is perform those simple actions directly from within the email message itself. So what happens when you click on approve in this instance is it will communicate with that backend system and do the approval. Now, it can do that in a secure way because Outlook knows who the user is. We can get tokens for this and we can communicate with the backend system. Obviously, there's development work required for the backend system to be able to be called. But the response to that is that this adaptive card can actually be changed. Now, this is the original email message. So originally it had buttons there for me to approve or reject, and now it's physically changed what that content of that email message is, and it's changed the backend system without me even leaving Outlook. So it's kept me in context of what I was doing. I can quickly perform the action. And what's great about this is that if I come back tomorrow and think, did I approve that expense or not? Because it's changed the content, I can see that it's been approved. And moreover, I can't even I couldn't reapprove it again. It's already been approved once. And this can happen across users as well. So if two people got sent the same email and it only required one of us to approve, it would change it in both people's email. So super, super powerful having these actionable messages. And because it's built on adaptive cards technology, adaptive cards have got the ability to have basic UI elements in them. So it's not just links that you could click on. You could also have basic controls. So there's text controls, date pickers, like on-off toggles, drop-down picker, like drop-down selection controls. So they're great for doing those small little workflow applications and just keeping the user in context. And that's what developing add-ins is all about. It's all about giving the users the tools they need to get the job done there and then without having to open up all those other windows. And coming to Outlook currently in preview is a lot more of the event-based events that, sorry, the event-based hook-ins where your add-in can react based on what the user is doing. And this opens up quite a few scenarios around being able to insert footers across all different devices that Outlook is inside of, ability to scan emails before they're sent and block the ability for a user to send an email based on the common one. I think Microsoft's actually built this into Outlook now, is if you write something in your message to say, see the attached message or message attached, it can detect that, hey, you don't actually have any attachments on this message. Do you really want to send this? And block the user. So you can be building in that sort of logic into your organization, maybe, and you can tell when the recipients have changed. So you might want to do special logic based on the fact that an external recipient's been added. So there's a lot of scenarios that are being opened up based on these events. Attachments being added, recipients changed. Same sort of thing with appointments as well. So if you're creating a calendar entries and someone's changing the time of it, they're changing who the host of the meeting is, we can react to those events and assist the user. Okay, so we talked about a fair bit. We've demoed a few little things here. So just to recap, what we've got to play with when we're building Office add-ins. We've got these common building blocks that exist across all of the applications in the Office suite that you want to be extending. We've got those add-in commands, which are the ribbon buttons. We've got the task pane that slides out and sits side by side with the application. We've got content add-ins. They would like the charts inside of Excel where you can have multiple of them and they form part of the content of the file. And we've got the dialogues that can pop out, give you more real estate to ask the user questions or interact with the user and close back down again. Inside of Excel, it really brings custom functions to the table. This ability to create your own custom functions, potentially even sell those and monetize them. In Outlook, we've got those contextual add-ins that can pick up certain bits of text, like we saw that Bing Maps add-in, and react to them. We've got module extensions. We can overtake the whole real estate inside of Outlook. We've got actionable messages, which really help for those workflows with your line of business systems. And we've got a lot of event-based activation coming through in Outlook in preview as well. And then underpinning all of that is you've got that Office.js API, which gives you like all the object model that you can interact with using any of those extensibility points. You can interact with the host applications. All right, I think we've made it to the end. These are just some resources for next steps for those that want to take it further and try it out for themselves. The Office add-ins documentation, that first link, that's probably the best place to start and links off to all the material, all the official material that Microsoft's got. Also, Microsoft Learn. If you haven't used Microsoft Learn before, it is awesome. It's a lot better than it used to all be just web page documentation. Microsoft have created Microsoft Learn, which is all module-based learning, self-paced, module-based learning, takes you through step by step. It's got samples to go through and you actually earn badges. It's all, you get rewards and all this sort of stuff and it tracks your learning through. But there's some really good Learn modules specifically to do with Office add-in development. Also, there's the Microsoft 365 Developer Program. That is a free program to join, and that actually gives you your own Microsoft 365 tenant so that you can play around with doing development and you're not having to use your work tenant or pay for a tenant. And that gives you all the Office applications as well to use in a web browser. I don't believe the Office 365 program includes the license for desktop Office programs. I think it's just web browser.
Yeah, it's just web.
Thanks for that. And then the last one is to keep your eyes out for Microsoft 365 developer boot camps. They also are free. They get run once a year. I think it's more towards the end of the year. I'm trying to remember when we did the last ones. I think it was September, October. But that's a worldwide initiative, but it's run locally. We run developer boot camps on doing all sorts of Office development, and typically that also includes Teams development and SharePoint development. But add-ins development is included as part of that as well. I have run those for the last 3 or 4 years for Australia, and I'll probably be doing it again this year. But that's sort of a hands-on deep dive where we can all code together. We can come in and help you out, but we also invite people to bring something that they're trying either in their own time or at work if there's things they're stuck on or ideas that they've had but haven't really had the time out to try and get a start on it. That's the type of things that developer boot camps are great for. And hopefully we can get back to doing those in person sometime soon. When we do them in person, what we've been doing around Australia is we do run them in most of the major cities. Running them virtually, we tend just to do one that covers off all of Australia. Okay, I think I've probably talked for long enough, and I will check the channel now to see if there are any questions in there. And if anyone wants to come off mute, ask me anything, feel free to. I've got one question in there from Ian. How do I save my own amended Scriptlab component to my Office 365 user account? Good question. No, I've ever tried to do that. I think there was an option in there to save them. I'm just not sure. I think it actually has some sort of linkage to a GitHub account. Let me see. Are you available to come off mute to explain that question there? Maybe not. That's okay. Okay, so if we did some modification to this, I think what Ian's question is if we did some modification to one of these snippets of code, how could he then save that so he doesn't lose it and it lives with his Office account? So there's the ability to import snippets here. Yeah, but that's just importing text, either grabbing it from a URL if you've saved it at a URL. So
I think the usuals would probably apply, copy and paste, or something like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that there is some, you can see there's this gist in here. I think you can actually associate the Scriptlab with a gist account and you can actually share it up there. As you can say, you've got to sign into GitHub. So this allows you to then save this directly to your GitHub account. So you can't actually save it to your Office account, but if you sign in with GitHub, it can save it to your GitHub account, and then you can load them back in from there. So I think that's the model that this add-in uses. Yeah, here's how we hook it into our GitHub account. So that was underneath where I've got my identity here. This is saying who I'm currently logged in as to GitHub. So if I was to go through that process, it then associates Scriptlab with my GitHub, and that's my repository for storing my scripts to use with Scriptlab. Any other questions?
Not so much a question, but more so just an observation. With the adaptive cards, they're very familiar in terms of flow. So your approvals and bits and pieces that come through Microsoft Flow are exactly those. So yeah, that was just my observation with that. But yeah, they're very cool. I like them.
Yeah, we're seeing adaptive cards, exactly as you say. Adaptive cards are turning up more and more through different products inside of Microsoft. We also see them in Teams as well. A lot of the messages that get posted in Teams are a form of adaptive card. As a developer, what it allows you to do, the adaptive cards, so the way the adaptive cards work is you concentrate more on declaratively saying what your card needs to do and what information it needs to have on it. Like it's got a heading, it needs to have this picture, rather than being a pixel perfect representation. Because where those cards can be used then looks great on the different devices. You don't need to be a designer to make it look great, because what that email message looked like with that adaptive card would look different on an iPhone to what it would look like on a full desktop version of Outlook. So the card actually changes appearance. If you're using a dark theme, it looks great and accessible in dark mode. So those cards, and that's that same sort of philosophy, is why Microsoft's adopting adaptive cards throughout the different technologies. Viva Connections uses cards as well in showing up the cards on the Viva dashboard. And yeah, we're seeing them inside of Flow. We see them inside of Teams. We're seeing them start to pop up all over the place.
Yeah, no, great. Anyone got any other questions or queries for Cameron at all? I think we're good.
All right, awesome.
Thank you very much, Cameron, for that. Much appreciated. I know we've had a bit of a mix-up today, so I do appreciate you jumping on early and presenting this afternoon. So thank you very much again. And what I'll do is I'll just share my screen as well. Have you got anything else you want to go through, Cameron, or?
No, that's it. Just say thanks for having me on, Daniel. Thanks for everyone. And thanks for questions.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you, Cameron. So next month we'll have Dan Anderson from Melbourne, Microsoft MVP. Many of you may know him. He's going to come on and speak, and we'll also have Michael coming on to do his security presentation as well. As soon as I have the topic back from Dan, I shall post out the newsletter. And that is happening on Tuesday, the 29th of March. I haven't updated that, and April spelt wrong. It's been a long week with COVID, unfortunately. Apologies for that. And thank you very much for attending this afternoon's bit awkward user group meeting, but I think we got through it. And thank you again for everyone attending and for Cameron as well. So thank you, everyone. If you've got any questions or queries, please feel free to reach out to Cameron or myself or anyone. More than happy to field any questions or pass them along to Cameron. So thank you, everyone, and hope to see you next month on the 19th. Cheers.